Captain Sarah Chen stood before the massive crystalline structure that housed the Galactic Council's central command, her boots clicking against the polished floors of New Geneva Station. The weight of humanity's first official diplomatic mission pressed heavily on her shoulders as she adjusted her formal military dress uniform. Behind her, Ambassador Marcus Webb shuffled through his digital notes one final time, his weathered face betraying none of the anxiety that had kept him awake for the past 3 days. The invitation had arrived 6 months ago through quantum channels that humanity barely understood. The message was simple and direct. Earth species had been observed, evaluated, and deemed worthy of provisional membership in the Galactic Council. It was the moment every human had dreamed of since the first telescope pointed toward the stars. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and they were being welcomed into a community of advanced civilizations. The journey to the Council station had taken them through hyperspace corridors that defied human understanding of physics. Their escort, a sleek vessel piloted by the insectoid Zephyrians, had remained professional but distant throughout the voyage. Captain Chen had attempted several times to engage their pilots in conversation about their technology or culture, but received only polite deflections and promises that all questions would be answered at the appropriate time. The council chamber itself was a marvel of engineering that stretched upward for what seemed like kilometers. Hundreds of different species occupied floating platforms arranged in concentric circles around a central speaking area. Chen recognized some from the preliminary briefings Earth scientists had hastily compiled. The tall, graceful Etherians with their translucent skin, the heavily armored Krathen who resembled walking mountains, and the aquatic Nereidans who remained submerged in specialized atmospheric suits filled with their homeworld's toxic oceans. As Ambassador Webb stepped forward to address the assembly, Chen noticed something that made her military instincts prickle with unease. The positioning of the various species wasn't random. The more technologically advanced races occupied the higher platforms, while those that appeared less developed were relegated to the lower levels. Humanity had been assigned to one of the lowest tiers, despite their rapid technological advancement over the past century. The Galactic Council's supreme coordinator, a being called Vexthul, whose species the humans had never encountered, began the proceedings with what appeared to be a standard welcome. Its voice came through the translation matrix as a pleasant baritone, though Chen suspected the original sounds were far from anything human vocal cords could produce. The words spoke of unity, cooperation, and shared advancement among the galactic community. But as the ceremony progressed, Chen began to notice inconsistencies in the translation. Her enhanced military augmentations allowed her to process multiple data streams simultaneously, and she had been recording everything through her neural interface. Certain phrases seemed to carry different emotional undertones than what the translation provided. When Vexthul spoke of humanity's unique contributions, there was something in the original alien language that suggested mockery rather than appreciation. Ambassador Webb delivered his prepared speech flawlessly, outlining humanity's achievements, their commitment to peace, and their eagerness to learn from older civilizations. The response from the assembly was polite but lukewarm. Chen had attended enough diplomatic functions to recognize the difference between genuine enthusiasm and practiced courtesy. The first red flag came during the technology sharing discussion. The Council's representatives explained that new member species were required to provide detailed schematics of their most advanced technologies as a gesture of good faith and to ensure galactic security. In return, they would receive access to basic galactic technologies that would accelerate their development by centuries. Chen's enhanced memory immediately flagged this as a violation of standard diplomatic protocol. No legitimate alliance began with one party surrendering their strategic advantages. She caught Ambassador Webb's eye and saw her own concerns reflected there. The veteran diplomat had spent decades navigating treacherous political waters, and he recognized a trap when he saw one. The Council's explanation was smooth and reasonable on the surface. They spoke of preventing technological accidents, ensuring compatibility with galactic standards, and maintaining the delicate balance that kept peace among hundreds of different species. But underneath the diplomatic language, Chen detected the real message: surrender your weapons and defenses, and trust us to protect you. When Webb politely requested time to consult with Earth's governments before agreeing to such comprehensive technology sharing, The Council's demeanor shifted subtly. Vexthol's response carried undertones of disappointment and veiled threats about the consequences of refusing galactic integration protocols. Other species in the assembly began to murmur among themselves, and Chen's translation software picked up fragments of conversations that made her blood run cold. The Zephyrian spoke of another stubborn primitive species, while the Krathan discussed resource allocation timelines. Most disturbing were the Etherians, whose whispered comments translated as speculation about how long it would take to process the human homeworld once the integration began. As the session concluded and the humans were escorted to their assigned quarters, Chen felt the weight of a terrible realization settling over her. Humanity hadn't been invited to join the Galactic Council as equals. They had been marked as the next target for conquest, and this entire diplomatic charade was merely the opening move in a campaign that would end with Earth's subjugation or destruction. The quarters provided for the human delegation were luxurious by any standard, but Chen noticed that the doors locked from the outside, and their communication equipment had been temporarily confiscated for security upgrades. They were prisoners masquerading as guests, and time was running out for both them and the billions of humans back on Earth who had no idea what was coming. That night, as Ambassador Webb paced their shared accommodation like a caged animal, Chen began formulating desperate plans. Somehow they had to escape this station, return to Earth, and warn humanity about the true nature of the Galactic Council. But first, they needed to understand exactly what they were up against and how much time they had before the facade dropped completely. 3 days into their diplomatic visit, Captain Chen had mapped every accessible corridor of their section of the station through careful exploration disguised as casual walks. The Zephyrian guards were professional but predictable, following patterns that her military training allowed her to memorize and exploit. More importantly, she had discovered that the station's internal communication network was far more vulnerable than their captors realized. The breakthrough came when she noticed that the decorative panels in their quarters weren't merely aesthetic. Hidden beneath the alien artwork were access ports for the station's maintenance systems. Her military augmentations included basic electronic warfare capabilities, and after hours of careful probing, she managed to tap into the station's data streams without triggering security protocols. What she found made her wish she had never looked. The Galactic Council's internal communications painted a picture of systematic conquest that spanned millennia. Hundreds of species had received the same invitation that humanity had accepted. Those who agreed to immediate technology transfer and submission were allowed to exist as client states, stripped of their military capabilities and forced to provide resources and labor to the Council's inner circle of dominant species. Those who refused faced a different fate entirely. Chen scrolled through after-action reports that read like genocide documentation. The Valoric Confederation had rejected the Council's terms and been systematically exterminated over a period of 18 months. The Singing Crystals of Harmony 7 had attempted to negotiate and found their homeworld cracked open by Council mining operations before their ambassadors even returned home. But the most chilling discovery was a detailed invasion plan for Earth labeled Operation Terran Integration. The document outlined a 3-phase campaign that would begin 6 months after the human delegation's return. Phase 1 involved infiltrating Earth's communication networks and government systems using technology hidden in the gifts the Council planned to send. Phase 2 would see the deployment of Council military assets to key strategic locations under the guise of establishing diplomatic missions. Phase 3 was the demand for complete surrender backed by overwhelming force. The plan was thorough and terrifying in its precision. Council strategists had identified every major military installation on Earth, cataloged humanity's defensive capabilities, and calculated the exact amount of force needed to break human resistance. They had even planned for the disposal of excess population that couldn't be efficiently integrated into their forced labor systems. Chen's hands shook as she read the projected casualty figures. The Council estimated that reducing Earth's population to sustainable levels would require the elimination of approximately 4 billion humans. The remaining survivors would be relocated to designated zones, where they could be more easily controlled and exploited. Ambassador Webb found her hunched over the hidden console at 3 in the morning, tears streaming down her face as she absorbed the magnitude of what awaited their species. When she showed him the documents, his diplomatic composure finally cracked. The man who had negotiated peace treaties and trade agreements across the solar system sat in stunned silence as the reality of their situation sank in. "We have to warn them," Webb whispered, his voice barely audible. "Earth needs to know what's coming." But escape seemed impossible. Their quarters were monitored constantly, their movements restricted to specific areas of the station, and their ship remained under Council control. Even if they could somehow break free, the journey back to Earth would take weeks through hyperspace, and the Council would simply accelerate their timeline in response to the security breach. The solution came from an unexpected source. During their 4th day of captivity, a maintenance worker entered their quarters to perform routine system updates. The being appeared to be from a species Chen hadn't encountered before, humanoid, but with distinctive crystalline growths along its arms and a translucent quality to its skin that reminded her of living glass. As the creature worked, it deliberately dropped a small device near Chen's feet. When she bent to retrieve it, the being's eyes met hers for just a moment, and she saw something there that gave her hope. Intelligence, awareness, and most importantly, sympathy. The device was a communication module, and when she activated it later that night, she found herself connected to something she never expected to find aboard a Council station. The resistance movement called itself the Silent Chain, and it was composed of survivors from dozens of species that had fallen victim to the Council's expansion. Some, like the maintenance worker who had contacted them, had been enslaved and forced to work aboard Council installations. Others were refugees who had escaped the destruction of their homeworlds and now lived in the shadows of galactic society. The leader of the local cell identified himself only as Fragment, one of the few surviving members of the Harmony 7's crystal-based civilization. Through encrypted communications that the Council couldn't detect, he explained that the Silent Chain had been working for centuries to warn new targets and occasionally help them escape the Council's trap. "Your species shows promise," Fragment transmitted in carefully modulated light pulses that Chen's augmentations could decode. "Your rapid technological advancement and your natural suspicion of authority figures suggest you might actually stand a chance if properly warned and prepared." The escape plan Fragment proposed was audacious and desperate. The Silent Chain had access to a small, fast ship hidden in the station's docking bay, 7 levels below their current location. If the humans could reach it, they could be on their way back to Earth within hours. But the route would take them through heavily monitored sections of the station, and they would have only minutes between the discovery of their escape and the activation of the station's defense systems. Chen studied the schematics Fragment provided and felt her military training kick into overdrive. The plan was risky, but it was feasible if they timed everything perfectly. They would need to create a distraction, disable several security checkpoints, and fight their way through at least 2 squads of armed guards. The odds weren't good, but they were infinitely better than waiting for the Council to complete their plans for humanity. As she began modifying Fragment's plan to account for their specific capabilities and resources, Chen allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. The Galactic Council had made a critical error in their assessment of humanity. They had classified humans as a typical primitive species, unaware of the warrior culture that had driven their rapid advancement. They were about to discover that humans didn't go quietly into extinction. The countdown to escape began that night, with Fragment's people positioning themselves throughout the station to provide assistance and confusion when the time came. Chen and Webb spent their final hours of captivity memorizing deck plans, practicing combat scenarios, and preparing for what might be humanity's last desperate gamble against galactic tyranny. The escape began at 0347 station time, when Fragment's sabotage team simultaneously triggered power fluctuations in 3 different sections of the massive structure. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in pulsing red illumination as maintenance teams scrambled to identify and repair the mysterious system failures. In the chaos that followed, Chen and Webb slipped from their quarters through a ventilation shaft that Fragment had quietly unlocked hours earlier. Chen moved with the fluid precision of someone who had spent years training for exactly this type of operation. Her military augmentations allowed her to navigate the cramped maintenance tunnels in near-complete darkness, following the route Fragment had mapped out through the station's infrastructure. Behind her, Ambassador Webb proved more capable than his diplomatic background suggested, moving with surprising agility for a man in his 60s. The first checkpoint came sooner than expected. Through a ventilation grate, Chen watched as two Zephyrian guards examined the corridor they needed to cross. Their insectoid forms moved with mechanical precision as they swept the area with scanning devices, searching for any sign of the escaped humans. Chen waited until both guards turned away before dropping silently into the corridor and eliminating them with nerve strikes that her enhanced reflexes made devastatingly effective. Webb's eyes widened at the speed and efficiency of the takedown, but he asked no questions as they dragged the unconscious guards into a storage alcove. Chen appropriated one of their weapons, a sleek energy rifle that felt surprisingly familiar in her hands despite its alien design. Her military training had emphasized adaptability, and years of experience with various weapon systems allowed her to quickly understand the device's basic operation. They encountered their first serious resistance at the junction leading to the lower levels. A full squad of Krathan soldiers had been positioned to guard the access tunnel, their massive armored forms making the corridor nearly impassable. Chen studied their formation from a concealed position and realized that direct confrontation would be suicide. The Krathan were at least 3 meters tall and appeared to be wearing powered armor that could probably shrug off anything short of heavy artillery. The solution came from Fragment himself, who emerged from a hidden panel behind the Krathan position, the crystalline being moved with surprising speed and grace, activating some kind of sonic weapon that resonated at frequencies that apparently disrupted the Krathan's equilibrium. The massive soldiers stumbled and fell as their inner ears were overwhelmed by sounds their species couldn't tolerate. Quickly now, Fragment transmitted as he led them past the writhing Krathan. The station's security systems are adapting to our sabotage. We have perhaps 10 minutes before they establish a proper perimeter. The lower levels of the station proved to be a maze of industrial, machinery and processing facilities that gave Chen disturbing insights into the Council's operations. Massive cargo bays held what appeared to be cultural artifacts from dozens of different civilizations, art, literature, and technology from species that no longer existed. She recognized the systematic looting that followed every Council integration and felt her anger at their captors burn even hotter. But it was the detention blocks that truly shook her. Hundreds of beings from various species were held in cramped cells, their conditions ranging from merely uncomfortable to actively torturous. Many appeared to be intellectuals, artists, and leaders, the individuals most likely to inspire resistance among conquered populations. The Council clearly believed in eliminating potential problems before they could develop. "We cannot save them all," Fragment transmitted sadly as Chen stared at the imprisoned beings. "But if your mission succeeds, perhaps their sacrifices will not be meaningless." The ship Fragment had promised was exactly where he said it would be. Hidden behind a maintenance facade that disguised its true nature, the vessel was small but clearly built for speed, with advanced stealth systems that would hopefully allow them to escape the station's detection grid. Chen ran through the pre-flight sequence with Webb while Fragment uploaded navigation data that would take them directly back to Earth through the fastest possible route. As they prepared for departure, alarms began sounding throughout the station. The Council's security forces had finally realized that their guests were missing and had begun a systematic search of all sections. Chen could hear the heavy footsteps of Krathan soldiers moving through the corridors above them, and the distinctive whine of Zephyrian scanner drones echoing through the air recycling systems. "They will not reach us in time," Fragment assured them as he made final adjustments to the ship's systems. "But you must understand that this vessel can only make the journey to Earth once. The Council will track its energy signature after your escape, and it will never again be able to approach their territory undetected." Chen nodded grimly as she strapped herself into the pilot's seat. She had trained on enough different aircraft to feel confident about handling the alien controls, though she suspected the journey ahead would test her abilities to their limits. Webb secured himself in the navigator's position and began studying the star charts Fragment had provided, plotting backup routes in case their primary path proved compromised. The hangar bay doors opened with surprising smoothness, revealing the vast expanse of space beyond. Chen had seen images of the region around the Council station, but experiencing it firsthand was breathtaking. Dozens of massive ships from various alien civilizations hung in perfect formation around the station, their weapons trained outward in a defensive formation that could probably destroy entire fleets. But Fragment's ship was designed for stealth rather than combat. As they slipped away from the station, Chen marveled at the sophistication of the vessel's cloaking systems. According to the displays, they were virtually invisible to most scanning technologies, appearing as little more than cosmic background radiation to external sensors. The first few minutes of their escape passed without incident, but Chen knew their reprieve was temporary. Once the Council realized their prisoners had actually escaped the station, they would mobilize everything at their disposal to prevent word of their plans from reaching Earth. The chase would be relentless and deadly, and their small ship would have to outrun some of the most advanced vessels in the galaxy. As they cleared the station's immediate vicinity and prepared to enter hyperspace, Chen caught a final transmission from Fragment. The crystalline being was already making his own escape, fading back into the shadows of the station where he would continue his resistance work until the Council finally tracked him down. "Tell your people to prepare," his message said simply. "The Council has underestimated humanity once. Do not allow them to make that mistake twice." With those words echoing in her mind, Chen engaged the hyperspace drive and watched the stars stretch into lines as they began their desperate race back to Earth. The journey through hyperspace became a nightmare of constant pursuit and near misses that tested every skill Chen had acquired during her military career. The Council's response to their escape had been swift and overwhelming. Within hours of leaving the station, their stolen ship's sensors detected at least 12 different vessels converging on their position from multiple vectors. Chen pushed the alien craft to its limits, weaving between gravitational anomalies and using stellar phenomena to mask their energy signature. The ship's artificial intelligence, speaking in Fragment's crystalline voice patterns, provided constant updates on their pursuers' positions and suggested evasive maneuvers that seemed to defy the laws of physics as humans understood them. Ambassador Webb proved invaluable during the chase, his diplomatic experience allowing him to understand the political implications of their situation better than Chen initially realized. As he monitored Council communications through the ship's advanced receivers, he began to piece together the broader strategic picture that made their escape even more critical than they had imagined. "They're not just planning to invade Earth," Webb reported during their third day of flight. "The Council is facing internal pressure from several member species who are beginning to question their expansion policies. Humanity was supposed to be a demonstration of their continued strength, a quick, clean conquest that would discourage any thoughts of rebellion." The intelligence Webb gathered painted a picture of an empire that was far less stable than it appeared on the surface. The Council's inner circle of dominant species controlled the others through a combination of superior technology and carefully maintained fear. But that control was beginning to crack. Several client species had begun developing their own weapons in secret, while others were engaging in subtle acts of sabotage against Council operations. Chen realized that their escape had likely triggered a crisis within the Council's leadership. If word spread that a primitive species like humanity had successfully defied them, it could inspire other conquered civilizations to attempt their own rebellions. The Council would be forced to make an example of Earth, regardless of the cost or the timeline they had originally planned. Their pursuers confirmed this theory through their increasingly desperate tactics. Council ships began attempting interception courses that risked structural damage to their own vessels, while long-range weapons fire became more frequent, despite the vast distances involved. Chen found herself flying through plasma storms and gravitational fields that should have been impossible to navigate, guided only by the ship's AI and her own instincts. The breakthrough came when they encountered a damaged vessel, drifting near the edge of a nebula that Fragment's navigation charts had marked as uninhabited. Chen's military training immediately identified it as a trap. The ship was too conveniently positioned and too obviously disabled to be genuine. But as they prepared to alter course, the vessel transmitted an encrypted signal that their ship's systems recognized as authentic silent chain protocols. The disabled ship contained 3 survivors from different species, each representing resistance cells that had been working independently against Council expansion. Their leader was a being called Nexus, whose species had been one of the first to fall to Council conquest nearly 1,000 years earlier. The ancient alien possessed knowledge of Council military tactics and weaknesses that proved invaluable as their pursuers closed in. Your species possesses something the Council has not encountered in centuries, Nexus explained as his people transferred to Chen's ship. You have maintained your warrior culture even as you developed advanced technology. Most civilizations abandon conflict as they advance, making them easy targets for conquest. Humanity appears to have done the opposite. The tactical information Nexus provided transformed their desperate flight into something resembling a strategic withdrawal. Chen learned to use the Council ship's own advanced sensors against them, creating false signatures and phantom contacts that divided their pursuers' attention. More importantly, she began to understand the psychological weaknesses that the Council's systematic approach to conquest had created in their military forces. Council commanders were trained to overwhelm inferior opponents through superior technology and coordinated tactics. They had little experience dealing with genuinely unpredictable adversaries who refused to follow established patterns of behavior. Chen began incorporating maneuvers from human military history, tactics, developed during Earth's own wars that relied on creativity and improvisation rather than technological superiority. The result was a series of encounters that left Council forces confused and frustrated. Chen used everything from ancient submarine warfare techniques to modern fighter pilot strategies, creating a combat style that their alien opponents couldn't predict or counter effectively. Each successful evasion boosted her confidence and demonstrated that Fragment had been right about humanity's potential, but the most significant development came when they reached the halfway point of their journey. Webb's monitoring of Council communications revealed that word of their escape had already begun spreading among the client species through underground networks. Several worlds had reported mysterious equipment failures and communication disruptions that suggested coordinated resistance activities. The Council's response was predictably harsh. Chen watched in horror as orbital bombardments began falling on worlds suspected of harboring resistance sympathizers. Entire cities were reduced to slag as the Council attempted to restore order through overwhelming displays of force. The death toll climbed into the millions as panic spread throughout their territory. This is what we've brought down on them, Webb said quietly as they watched the casualty reports accumulate. Our escape has triggered exactly what the Council feared most, a general uprising that threatens their entire power structure. But Nexus disagreed with the ambassador's assessment. These rebellions were inevitable, the ancient being insisted. The Council's system of control was always unsustainable. Your escape merely provided the catalyst for changes that were already building throughout their territory. Without your warning, humanity would have fallen and these uprisings would have been crushed before they could gain momentum. As they approached the final phase of their journey, Chen realized that they were no longer just carrying a warning back to Earth. They had become symbols of resistance for oppressed species throughout the galaxy, proof that the Council could be defied and defeated. The small ship racing through hyperspace carried the hopes of billions of beings who had never expected to see freedom again. But first, they had to reach Earth alive. The final stretch of their journey would take them through the outer edges of the solar system, where Council advanced scouts might already be positioning themselves for the coming invasion. Chen prepared for the most dangerous part of their mission, knowing that failure at this point would doom both humanity and every species counting on them to succeed. The outer solar system had become a battlefield by the time Chen's ship dropped out of hyperspace near Neptune's orbit. Long-range sensors immediately detected at least 20 alien vessels scattered throughout the region, their positions suggesting a carefully planned blockade designed to prevent any escape from Earth. The Council had moved faster than anyone expected, and their advance forces were already in position for the coming invasion. Chen felt a moment of despair as she realized the magnitude of what they faced. Even if they managed to reach Earth with their warning, humanity would have only weeks or days to prepare for an assault by forces that had conquered hundreds of worlds. The Council ships lurking in the solar system represented technology centuries ahead of anything Earth could deploy, and their crews had experience fighting species far more advanced than current human civilization. But Nexus reminded her of something Fragment had emphasized during their escape planning. The Council's greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. They relied heavily on established patterns and predictable responses from their enemies. Humanity's chaotic and unpredictable nature might provide advantages that no other species had possessed when facing Council conquest. Your people have been fighting each other for millennia, Nexus observed as he studied Earth's military history through the ship's databases. This has given you tactical flexibility and combat experience that most civilizations lose when they achieve technological unity. The Council expects you to behave like rational, civilized beings. Instead, you will fight like the warriors you have always been. The approach to Earth required all of Chen's accumulated skills and experience. She used the solar system's asteroid belt as cover, weaving between chunks of rock and ice while avoiding the detection grids the Council ships had established. The journey that should have taken hours stretched into days as they crept through space, moving in short bursts when solar interference provided temporary concealment. Webb worked frantically to establish contact with Earth's governments through quantum channels that the Council couldn't easily monitor. The diplomatic protocols he had spent decades perfecting proved invaluable as he navigated the complex process of convincing world leaders that an alien invasion was imminent. The evidence they carried was overwhelming, but the implications were so staggering that many officials initially dismissed their reports as elaborate hoaxes. The breakthrough came when they managed to transmit detailed scans of the Council, ships hiding throughout the solar system. Earth's most advanced telescopes confirmed the presence of massive alien vessels in positions that could only be interpreted as hostile. Within hours, emergency sessions were convened in every major capital as humanity's leaders grappled with the reality of what was coming. But Chen knew that political recognition of the threat was only the first step. Earth's current military capabilities were utterly inadequate to face the Council's forces in conventional warfare. Humanity needed to find ways to leverage their unique characteristics and turn the Council's expectations against them. The resistance would have to be unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. As they finally reached Earth's orbital space, Chen was amazed to discover that preparations were already underway. Hidden construction projects that had been dismissed as commercial ventures were revealed to be military installations designed to protect key population centers. Advanced weapon systems that supposedly existed only in research facilities were being rapidly deployed to strategic locations around the globe. Admiral Sarah Rodriguez, Chen's former commanding officer, met them at Luna Base with news that humanity had not been as unprepared as they feared. Earth's military leaders had been quietly developing contingency plans for alien contact scenarios for decades, and many of the technologies they would need already existed in prototype form. What they lacked was time to scale up production and train personnel for galactic-level warfare. "We've been analyzing the intelligence you transmitted," Rodriguez explained as they reviewed tactical displays showing the Council forces' positions. "Their deployment patterns suggest they're planning a demonstration attack designed to force immediate surrender. They want to minimize damage to Earth's infrastructure while eliminating our ability to resist." Chen studied the tactical situation and realized that the Council's approach contained fatal flaws they could exploit. The aliens had positioned their forces to attack military targets while avoiding civilian areas, following rules of engagement that reflected their civilized approach to conquest. But humanity's most effective military assets weren't always located where the Council expected them to be. The resistance strategy that emerged from their planning sessions was deliberately chaotic and unpredictable. Instead of attempting to match the Council's technological superiority, Earth's forces would focus on asymmetric warfare tactics that exploited the aliens' psychological weaknesses and cultural blind spots. Every engagement would be designed to confuse and frustrate enemies who expected rational, predictable responses. Nexus proved invaluable during the planning process, sharing intelligence about Council military doctrine and tactical preferences gathered over centuries of resistance operations. The ancient aliens' insights revealed that Council forces were particularly vulnerable to unconventional weapons and tactics that fell outside their standard threat assessment protocols. "They will expect you to defend your major cities and military installations," Nexus explained. "Instead, you should make them fight for every asteroid, every space station, every piece of orbital debris. Force them to adapt to human unpredictability, rather than allowing them to impose their structured approach to conquest." The plan that emerged was ambitious and desperate. Earth's forces would be divided into countless small units that could operate independently behind enemy lines. Rather than attempting to hold territory, They would focus on disrupting Council operations and forcing the aliens to fight the kind of chaotic, multi-front war that their training had never prepared them for. But the most critical element of the strategy involved the information warfare campaign that Webb was coordinating with resistance cells throughout Council territory. Every human victory, no matter how small, would be broadcast across the galaxy to inspire other conquered species and demonstrate that the Council could be defeated. The goal was to turn Earth's invasion into the spark that ignited rebellion throughout the Council's empire. As the final preparations were completed, Chen found herself appointed to command one of the most dangerous missions in human history. She would lead a strike team tasked with capturing one of the Council's command ships intact, providing Earth scientists with access to advanced alien technology, while simultaneously demonstrating humanity's willingness to take the fight directly to their enemies. Standing on Luna, base's observation deck, looking out at the stars where Council ships waited to begin their attack, Chen felt the weight of humanity's future pressing down on her shoulders. In less than 48 hours, the invasion would begin, and Earth would face its greatest test since the species first learned to make fire. But for the first time since their escape from the Council station, she felt genuinely optimistic about their chances. The Council's invasion began precisely at 0600 Universal Coordinated Time, with synchronized strikes against what their intelligence identified as Earth's primary military installations. Orbital bombardment platforms that had remained hidden for weeks suddenly revealed themselves, raining plasma fire down on targets from North America to Asia. The initial assault was designed to cripple human resistance within hours, following patterns that had proven successful against dozens of other species. But the Council commanders quickly discovered that their intelligence was catastrophically flawed. The installations they targeted were elaborate decoys, filled with holographic projectors and sensor spoofing equipment that made empty structures appear to be major military bases. The real defense platforms had been hidden in locations the aliens never suspected, buried beneath civilian infrastructure, disguised as commercial satellites, and concealed within the asteroid belt itself. Chen watched the opening exchanges from the bridge of the captured Council scout ship her team had successfully seized during a pre-dawn raid. The alien vessel's advanced sensors provided a comprehensive view of the battlefield, and she felt fierce satisfaction as Council forces stumbled into trap after trap that human ingenuity had prepared. For them, the first major shock came when the Zephyrian assault fleet attempted to establish orbital control over North America. Instead of the coordinated resistance they expected from Earth's space forces, they encountered thousands of independently operating units that seemed to attack from impossible angles. Human pilots flying modified civilian spacecraft emerged from the planet's magnetic field shadows, struck at Council formations, and vanished back into sensor dead zones before the aliens could respond effectively. Admiral Rodriguez's voice crackled through the communication system as she coordinated the defense from her hidden command center deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. All units implement Chaos Protocol 7. Make them fight for every meter of space. Don't give them time to establish predictable patterns. The Chaos Protocols were humanity's answer to the Council's systematic approach to conquest. Instead of fighting according to established military doctrine, Earth's forces would deliberately create confusion and disorder that forced their technologically superior enemies to adapt constantly to new threats. Every engagement was designed to be unique and unpredictable, preventing the Council from developing effective countermeasures. Chen's mission was the most audacious element of the entire defense strategy. Using the captured scout ship's stealth systems and identification codes, her team had infiltrated the Council's fleet formation and was approaching their primary command vessel, a massive dreadnought that served as the invasion's strategic center. The plan was to board the alien ship, capture its command crew, and turn their own technology against them. The boarding operation required precision timing that tested every member of Chen's carefully selected team. Sergeant Martinez, a veteran of the Mars colonial conflicts, led the assault specialist who would clear the ship's internal defenses. Dr. Sarah Kim, one of Earth's leading xenobiologists, was responsible for understanding alien technology quickly enough to operate captured systems. Lieutenant Commander Jackson brought expertise in electronic warfare that would prove crucial for disrupting the ship's defensive networks. As their scout ship docked with the dreadnought using stolen access codes, Chen felt the familiar calm that came before decisive action. Her military augmentations were running at peak efficiency. Her team was prepared for any contingency, and they carried weapons specifically designed to function in alien environments. More importantly, they had something the Council's forces lacked: desperation born from fighting for their species' survival. The initial penetration went smoothly, with the team moving through maintenance corridors that the ship's crew never expected to be compromised. Chen's enhanced senses detected alien life signs throughout the massive vessel, but most were concentrated in areas far from their infiltration route. The Dreadnought's crew was focused on managing the invasion, not defending against boarders who shouldn't have been able to reach them. But the mission's complexity became apparent as they approached the command section. The ship's internal layout was unlike anything in human military design, with corridors that curved through multiple dimensions and control, systems that required understanding of alien psychology to operate effectively. Dr. Kim's expertise proved invaluable as she guided them through sections that would have been impassable without xenobiological knowledge. The command center itself was a marvel of alien engineering that stretched across multiple levels connected by gravitational field manipulators. Dozens of different species worked at control stations designed for their specific physiologies, while holographic displays showed the progress of the invasion from multiple perspectives. Chen realized that capturing this facility intact would provide Earth with intelligence beyond anything they had dared hope, for the assault began with Sergeant Martinez's team using specialized electromagnetic pulse weapons to disable the alien crew's technological augmentations. Most Council species relied heavily on artificial enhancements that made them vulnerable to directed energy attacks that humans had developed for use against their own cybernetic systems. The result was chaos as the command crew found themselves cut off from the networks that coordinated their activities. Chen moved through the confusion with lethal efficiency, her augmented reflexes allowing her to disable multiple aliens before they could adapt to the unexpected attack. The Zephyrian commander proved more dangerous than expected, its natural agility allowing it to evade several capture attempts before Lieutenant Commander Jackson managed to disrupt its nervous system with a targeted neural disruptor. Dr. Kim immediately began interfacing with the ship's central computer, her expertise allowing her to navigate alien software architecture that would have baffled conventional programmers. Within minutes, she had gained access to the tactical networks that coordinated the entire invasion fleet, providing Earth's forces with real-time intelligence about Council positions and intentions. But the most shocking discovery came when Kim accessed the communication logs between the Dreadnought and the Council's home territory. The invasion of Earth had triggered the largest rebellion in galactic history, with over 40 species simultaneously rising against Council control. The empire that had seemed unshakable was fracturing under the weight of its own oppression, and humanity's resistance had become the symbol that unified countless oppressed civilizations. "Chen, you need to see this," Kim called out as data streams flooded the captured displays. "The Council isn't just fighting us. They're fighting half the galaxy. Our escape from their station started something they can't control." As Chen absorbed the implications of what they had discovered, she realized that Earth's battle had become something far larger than a simple invasion. Humanity had accidentally triggered a galactic war of liberation that would determine the future of countless civilizations. The pressure was enormous, but so was the opportunity to reshape the balance of power throughout known space. The mission was no longer just about defending Earth. They had to find a way to coordinate with resistance movements across the galaxy and turn the Council's systematic conquest machine against itself. The war was just beginning, but for the first time since their escape, Chen believed that victory was actually possible. 6 months after the first shots were fired above Earth, the galaxy had transformed into a battlefield that spanned thousands of star systems. The Galactic Council's empire, built over millennia of systematic conquest, was collapsing under the weight of simultaneous rebellions that their military forces couldn't suppress. From the crystal forests of Harmony 7 to the ocean worlds of the Nereid Collective, oppressed species were throwing off their chains and reclaiming their freedom. Chen stood in the command center of Liberated Station, Formerly one of the Council's most secure military installations, now the headquarters of the newly formed Galactic Liberation Alliance. The massive facility orbited a neutron star whose gravitational anomalies made it nearly impossible to attack, providing a safe haven where representatives from dozens of species could coordinate their resistance efforts. The transformation had been remarkable to witness. Species that had been enemies for centuries were working together, united by their shared hatred of Council oppression. The Krathen, once feared as the Council's primary enforcers, had revealed that their warrior culture had been systematically suppressed for generations. When they finally broke free, their knowledge of Council military tactics proved invaluable to the rebellion. Ambassador Webb, now serving as Earth's primary liaison to the Alliance, moved between diplomatic groups with the confidence of someone who had found his true calling. The skills that had made him an effective negotiator during humanity's solar system conflicts translated perfectly to galactic diplomacy. More importantly, his experience with the Council's deception had given him credibility that other resistance leaders respected. The latest intelligence reports are encouraging, Webb announced as the daily strategic briefing began. Council forces have withdrawn from 17 star systems in the past week alone. Their supply lines are overextended, and they're losing the ability to maintain control over their core territories. But Chen knew that desperation made the Council even more dangerous. Recent intercepted communications suggested that their leadership was preparing to deploy weapons of mass destruction against rebellious worlds, abandoning any pretense of preserving conquered populations for exploitation. The war was entering its most critical phase, where the Council's survival instincts might drive them to commit genocide on an unprecedented scale. The solution came from an unexpected source. Fragment, the crystalline being who had helped them escape from the Council station, had spent months infiltrating the Empire's central command structure. His latest intelligence burst revealed the location of the Council's ultimate weapon, a device capable of triggering stellar collapse that could destroy entire solar systems in minutes. The stellar destabilizer is housed in the Council's most secure facility, Fragment's message explained. It is defended by automated systems that make direct assault impossible. But the device requires regular calibration using frequencies that only crystalline beings like my species can generate. If I can reach the facility, I can turn their ultimate weapon against them. The mission to reach Fragment and destroy the stellar destabilizer became the Alliance's highest priority. Chen found herself commanding a strike force composed of the best warriors from a dozen different species, each bringing unique capabilities that would be essential for penetrating the Council's defenses. The diversity that the Council had tried to suppress through conquest now became the rebellion's greatest strength. Dr. Kim had spent months studying captured Council technology, developing countermeasures that could neutralize their most advanced defense systems. Her work had evolved far beyond simple xenobiology into something approaching technological alchemy, as she found ways to merge human engineering with alien science that produced results neither species could achieve alone. The assault on the Council's central facility was unlike anything in military history. Ships from dozens of different civilizations attacked in perfect coordination, their varied technologies creating combinations that the Council's defensive computers couldn't predict or counter. Zephyrian stealth ships created sensor shadows that allowed Krathen assault vessels to approach undetected, while Nereid plasma weapons overloaded energy shields that had been designed to resist more conventional attacks. Chen led the boarding parties through corridors filled with the desperate last defenders of a dying empire. Council forces fought with the fury of beings who knew their entire civilization hung in the balance, but they were facing enemies who had endured centuries of oppression and would not be denied their freedom. The battle raged through the facility's multiple levels as Alliance forces fought their way toward the chamber, housing the stellar destabilizer. Fragment waited for them in the device's control room, his crystalline form already interfacing with the weapon's calibration systems. The ancient being had spent the last of his energy reaching this moment, and Chen could see that his life force was fading as he prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice for galactic freedom. "The weapon is ready," Fragment transmitted weakly. "I have programmed it to target the Council's primary fleet concentrations and their remaining strongholds. But activating it will require me to merge completely with the device's control matrix, I will not survive the process. Chen wanted to argue to find another solution that wouldn't cost Fragment his life, but she knew there was no time. Council reinforcements were already approaching the facility, and they had minutes at most before the Alliance forces would be overwhelmed. The crystalline being's sacrifice would end the war, and free billions of oppressed beings throughout the galaxy. As Fragment began the activation sequence, Chen felt the weight of everything that had led to this moment, from their desperate escape from the Council station to the Galactic rebellion that followed. Every choice had built toward this final confrontation between freedom and oppression. The being's Fragment was about to save would never know his name, but his sacrifice would ensure their children grew up free. The stellar destabilizer activated with a sound that seemed to resonate through the very fabric of space-time. Across the galaxy, Council fleet concentrations simply vanished as their local stars became unstable and collapsed. The Empire's remaining strongholds found themselves isolated and cut off from any hope of support or resupply. In the aftermath, as Alliance forces secured the facility and Fragment's remains were given the honors due to a hero, Chen realized that the war was effectively over. The Council's power had been broken, their fleet destroyed, and their leadership scattered. The galaxy would need time to heal from millennia of oppression. But the foundations of freedom had been established. Standing in the facility's observation deck, looking out at stars that now shone on free worlds, Chen allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Humanity had been targeted for conquest because the Council saw them as just another primitive species to be enslaved. Instead, they had encountered warriors who refused to surrender, sparked a rebellion that freed the galaxy, and proven that no empire, no matter how powerful, could suppress the fundamental desire for freedom that existed in every sentient being. The warning they had carried back to Earth had saved not just humanity, but countless civilizations throughout the galaxy. The Galactic Council's age of oppression was over, and a new era of cooperation and mutual respect could finally begin.